Hi Pine class, it is Friday afternoon and it's our final story time of the week. We're on to chapter 12 of Danny the Champion in the World, and chapter 12 is called Thursday and School. Now this is a very long chapter, so we might have to do it in 3 parts, so we'll do the first part today. The next day was Thursday, and before we set out for the walk to school that morning, I went around behind the caravan and picked 2 apples from our tree. One for my father and one for me. It is a most marvellous thing to be able to go out and help yourself to your own apples whenever you feel like it. You can do this only in the autumn, of course, when the fruit is ripe. But all the same, how many families are so lucky? Not 1 in 1,000, I would guess. Our apples were called Cox's Orange Pippins, and I like the sound of the name almost as much as I like the apples. At 8 o'clock, we started walking down the road towards my school in the pale autumn sunshine, munching our apples as we strode along. Clink went my father's iron foot each time he put it down on the hard road. "Have you brought enough money to buy the raisins?" I asked. He put a hand in his trouser pocket and made the coins jingle. "Will Cooper's be open so early?" "Yes," he said. "They open at 8:30. I really loved those morning walks to school with my father. We talked practically the whole time. Mostly it was he who talked and I who listened, and just about everything he said was fascinating. He was a true countryman. The fields, the streams, the woods, and all the creatures who lived in these places were a part of his life. Although he was a mechanic by trade, and a very fine one at that, I believe he could have become a great naturalist if only he'd had a good schooling. Long ago he taught me the names of all the trees and the wildflowers and the different grasses that grow in the fields. All the birds, too, I could name, not only by sighting them, but by listening to their calls and their songs. In springtime we'd hunt for birds' nests along the way, and when we found one he'd lift me up onto his shoulders so I could peer into it and see the eggs. But I was never allowed to touch them. My father told me a nest with eggs in it was one of the most beautiful things in the world. I thought so too. The nest of a song thrush, for instance, lined inside with dry mud as smooth as polished wood, and with 5 eggs of the purest blue speckled with black dots. And the skylark, whose nest we once found right in the middle of a field in a grassy clump on the ground. It was hardly a nest at all, just a little hollow place in the grass, and in it were 6 small eggs, deep brown and white. "Why does the skylark make its nest on the ground where the cows can trample it?" I asked. "Nobody knows why," my father said. "But they always do. Nightingales nest on the ground too, so do pheasants and partridges and grouse." On one of our walks, a weasel flashed out of the hedge in front of us, and in the next few minutes I learned a lot of things about that marvellous little creature. The bit I liked best was when my father said, "The weasel is the bravest of all animals. The mother will fight to the death to defend her own children. She will never run away, not even from a fox which is 100 times bigger than her. She will stay beside her nest and fight until the fox is killed or until she is killed." Another time, when I said, "Just listen to that grasshopper, Dad," he said, "No, that's not a grasshopper, my love, it's a cricket. And did you know that crickets have their ears in their legs?" "It's not true." "It's absolutely true, and grasshoppers have theirs in the sides of their tummies. They're lucky to be able to hear at all, because nearly all the vast hordes of insects on this earth are deaf as well as dumb and live in a silent world." On this Thursday, on this particular walk to school, there was an old frog croaking in the stream behind the hedge as we went by. "Can you hear him, Danny?" "Yes," I said. "That is a bullfrog calling to his wife. He does it by blowing out his dewlap and letting it go with a burp." "What is a dewlap?" I asked. "It's the loose skin on his throat. He can blow it up just like a little balloon." "And what happens when his wife hears him?" "She goes hopping over to him. She's very happy to have been invited. But I'll tell you something very funny about the old bullfrog. He often becomes so pleased with the sound of his own voice that his wife has to nudge him several times before he'll stop his burping and turn round to hug her. That made me laugh. "Don't laugh too loud," he said, twinkling at me with his eyes. "We men are not so very different from the bullfrog." We parted at the school gates, and my father went off to buy the raisins. Other children were streaming in through the gates and heading up the path to the front door of the school. Ours was just a small village school, a squat, ugly red brick building with no upstairs rooms at all. Above the front door was a big grey block of stone cemented into the brickwork, and on the stone it said, "This school was erected in 1902 to commemorate the coronation of His Royal Highness King Edward VII. I must have read that thing 1,000 times. Every time I went in the door, it hit me in the eye. I suppose that's what it was there for. But it's pretty boring to read the same old words over and over again, and I often thought how nice it would be if they put something different up there every day, something really interesting. My father would have done it for them beautifully. He could have written it with a bit of chalk on the smooth grey stone, and each morning it could have said something new. He would have said things like, "Did you know that the little yellow clover butterfly often carries his wife around on his back?" Another time he might have said, "The guppy has funny habits. When he falls in love with another guppy, he bites her on the bottom." And another time, "Did you know that the death's head moths can squeak?" And then again, "Birds have almost no sense of smell, but they have good eyesight and they love red colours. The flowers they like are red and yellow, but never blue." There were about 60 boys and girls in our school, and their ages went from 5 to 11. We had 4 classrooms and 4 teachers. Miss Birdseye taught the kindergarten, the 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, and she was a really nice person. She used to keep a bag of aniseed balls in the drawer of her desk, and anyone who did work would be given 1 aniseed ball to suck right there and then during the lesson. The trick with aniseed balls is never to bite them. If you keep them rolling around your mouth, they'll dissolve slowly of their own accord, and then, right in the centre, you'll find a tiny little brown seed. This is the aniseed itself, and when you crush it between your teeth, it has a fabulous taste. My father told me that dogs go crazy about it. When there aren't any foxes around, the huntsman will drag a bag of aniseed for miles and miles over the countryside, and the foxhounds will follow the scent because they love it so. This is known as a drag hunt. The 7 and 8-year-olds were taught by Mr. Corrado, and he was also a decent person. He was a very old teacher, probably 60 or more, but that didn't seem to stop him being in love with Miss Birdseye. We knew he was in love with her, because he always gave her the best bits of meat at lunch when it was his turn to do the serving. And when she smiled at him, he'd smile back at her, in the soppiest way you could possibly imagine, showing all his front teeth, top and bottom, and most of the others as well. A teacher called Captain Lancaster took the 9 and 10-year-olds, and this year that included me. Captain Lancaster, sometimes known as Lankers, was a horrid man. He had a fiery, carrot-coloured hair and a little clipped carroty moustache and a fiery temper. Carroty-coloured hairs were also sprouting out of his nostrils and his ear holes. He'd been a captain in the army during the war against Hitler, and that was why he still called himself Captain Lancaster instead of just plain Mister. My father said it was an idiotic thing to do. There were millions of people still alive, he said, who'd fought in that war, but most of them wanted to forget the whole beastly thing, especially those crummy military titles. Captain Lancaster was a violent man, and we were all terrified of him. He used to sit at his desk stroking his carroty moustache and watching us with pale, watery blue eyes, searching for trouble. As he sat there, he would make queer snuffling grunts through his nose, like some dog sniffing round a rabbit hole. And that's where we're going to stop for today. Next week we will carry on with chapter 12, and I think we'll learn a little bit more about Danny's school. Have a lovely weekend, everybody.